Hi, and welcome to the 49th episode of the Photoshop Show. Tonight, we have a great guest for you in David Biedny. Unfortunately, he's stuck in a snowstorm and won't be able to make it. So what we thought we would do, it is very unfortunate. You know, just before I move on to telling you what we are going to do, I want to tell you that David is and has been the most watched guest on the Photoshop Show in history. That's just about 2 years of running. He is the most popular guest, and that's because he has forgotten more about Photoshop than all of us will ever know. He is really a superstar when it comes to Photoshop, and we're really, really sad that we can't bring him to you tonight, but hopefully there will be another date set up, and hopefully he gets to where he's going safely. That being said, what we're going to do is have a casual hangout. Jan has a tutorial she's putting together about some features in Lightroom, and they're always great. Jan's going to talk a little bit about the Arcanum, Trey Ratcliffe's mentorship program with levels, and it's just incredibly interesting, and she's just going to share a little bit about what she's doing with that. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the new mentorships I'm running that are starting next week, and are just two of them are just about full and one has space, but I'll talk about that a little later. In the meantime, I just want to introduce you to the producer and photographer extraordinaire, Dave Bell. Hi, Dave.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here with you again tonight. And I feel bad for all the folks on the East Coast who seem to just keep getting hit. And our problem here is no rain, no nothing, just warm. It's kind of emergency out here in California. But
yeah,
just looking forward to seeing what you guys got tonight.
Yeah, we're in the middle of another deep freeze up here. I think Midwest and in Canada here in central Canada, I think we're hitting about minus 35 Celsius tonight. That's getting close to just about the same thing in the Fahrenheit scale, so it's really, really, really cold.
Yeah, I just picked 10 lemons today. I needed to get them off my tree.
Yes, lemons. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like to eat a lemon right now just to feel sunshine. Anyway, hi, Erika. You're also a photographer extraordinaire, and you're in the warm, sunny South as well. You were telling me you were out in the garden today, and I was mentioning that if I was to go into the garden, I would have to dig through a couple of feet of snow. So that's not happening. How are you doing tonight?
We're good. We're under severe fire danger around here, and we've got a little brush fire yesterday, and we have had so little rain that we're a tinderbox out here. But we are enjoying high winds and 85-degree weather.
Wow.
So, yep.
And, well, I don't know which is worse.
Sunsets. So, unfortunately, I haven't been able to do what I love, which is heading to the beach during the sunsets because of the Santa Ana winds. So, I've been hanging out in my garden.
Yeah, well, I'll be thinking about you when I'm shoveling snow tomorrow morning.
Yeah, this time last year, the Napa Valley was already just covered with the bright yellow mustard, but it's just all brown.
I was watching a news. I was watching a news report up here. There's some areas down there they're concerned about the mango crops now. I don't think it's in California. I think it's in Florida. But they're getting an unusual early spring, and it's triggered the trees to begin to go into bud.
Wow.
And they're afraid that it's actually going to freeze again and wreck the was it avocados or mangoes? I think it was avocado crop. So yeah, crazy weather everywhere. Anyway, so Jan, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. A little stressed. It's always a little stressful when there's a last-minute change, but yeah, doing great.
Oh, it's not so bad. We're flexible. And
yeah, we're pros.
It's always fun to see you guys, and there's always so much to talk about. There's always new things coming out. Adobe just never lets us sit in peace and get used to what we have. They have to keep giving us new things all the time.
Yeah.
So, one of the things, Ron, I was thinking about as you were talking about winter, and those of you who don't have real winter, is that I was trying to shoot in the snow this week a little bit. And I had to go back and look up some of the things that you have to do when you shoot in the snow. And you've had experience with that, I know, right, Ron?
Yeah, it's almost second nature to me to automatically make those adjustments, like to add a little bit of light. One of the primary things you need to do when shooting in snow or bright sand is trick your camera into thinking there's a little less light by adding exposure. So I just use the plus-minus compensation dial and add one or a little more stops when I'm shooting snow, and that gives, because the camera is tricked, it's trying to make, camera doesn't know snow or sand or dirt or mud, it doesn't know the difference, it's just trying to make everything a nice neutral color, or gray, sorry. And so when you're shooting snow, it's going to try and make your snow a nice neutral gray, which is going to defeat the purpose. So you have to trick your camera back, dial in a little bit of extra light with your plus-minus compensation button, and you're all set.
That's right. And, you know, if you don't do that and you're shooting raw, you still have lots of latitude. I actually run into two problems, and I thought maybe one of the things I could show you tonight is a photo I took in the snow a couple days ago and how I can fix it in Lightroom, even though I didn't do the right things as you just described in the field. Would you
good.
people to see that for a second?
Yeah, go ahead and screen.
All right, let me screen share, and let me see if I can screen share. That's always the hardest part of this. It's a lot of hovering one has to do. And click the little green button, and then I'll click desktop, and I'll start my screen share. So can you see my Lightroom develop module right now?
Yeah, it just came up, Janet.
Yep.
Great. So there's a photo that I took in the snow, and it was really bright out. And this was both in, you know, like a sunny, half shady, dappled area. And so two things happened. The first is what Ron was talking about, which is even though the exposure in my camera's meter looked correct, the photo is obviously too dark, underexposed. And the second thing has to do with, so that's about tone. And then the second quality is color. And as you can see, what color is it that it shouldn't be?
Blue.
Blue. And that is so very typical that photos you shoot in a bright sunny day in the snow, particularly the shadowy areas, will have this blue unnatural color tint. But fortunately, I shot this in RAW. And I think it's really important, if you don't know this already, to understand that one of the big benefits of shooting RAW is that it's as if your white balance was starting from scratch. It doesn't matter what you set your white balance to in your camera. There is no need to futz and fiddle with the gray card or the, what is that thing called, that little exposure ring you can put on your camera? Expose something, I can't remember the name of it. It really doesn't matter what you're, pardon?
Expo disc.
Thank you, Expo disc, right. You don't have to do any of that because you can just set your white balance from scratch. So over here in Lightroom, I'm going to go up to my basic panel just to show you that it's true. So if I go to the temperature slider and I just start dragging it from blue toward gold, I hope you can see that on your screen, the difference in the color of the snow. Can you?
Yes, we can.
Absolutely.
So I'll do a before and after. Actually, let me do it like this. I'm going to press Shift-Tab to get rid of everything, and then I'm going to do a before and after without all that stuff around it. So that's how it was a second ago before any adjustment in Lightroom. And with just dragging that one temperature slider to the right, now looks a lot more like the scene that I saw, at least in terms of color. And so this is the equivalent. You know, if I were smart, I would have done more of this in the camera. I actually did increase the exposure compensation dial on my camera. I think I did a stop, but that wasn't enough. Ron, you said you sometimes do 2 stops, correct?
So this is already a full stop over?
I believe so. If it wasn't this one, it was one of, you know, I took 3 or 4, and they all came through despite that.
Yeah, I was going to say it depends on the brightness and if there's sunshine, but I go anywhere from 1 to even a little over 2 stops difference.
I do that for the beach as well.
Yes, I do too. So I'm going now into the library module. I press G on the keyboard. That took me back to the library module where you see the grid of all the photos I took. And it should be, there should be one for something that shows if you did exposure compensation. If I go to the metadata panel and I change it to show me all the EXIF and IPTC information, you guys see anything that says?
No, 0. You have 0.
Where? Here it is. Okay, that one is 0. That one is 0. That one. There we go. So this one here was 0.3 overexposed. I will make that one bigger so you can see. Let's get our toolbar up. What do you do if the toolbar is missing? You guys know, right?
Click the triangle.
Control T.
Oh,
Press
yeah.
T. And actually, what I was looking for isn't even that. It is the...
Well, the backslash key for the... Sorry, I'm kind of between two things, and I'm trying to see what you're doing.
Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm trying to get to my thumbnail slider, and because the resolution on my screen is way up, I can't get my thumbnail slider to show up. So there it is. All right, so what I was doing was I first had to make sure I could see my toolbar. So if I press T, the toolbar goes away. If I press T again, it appears. But it was so full of other features that the thumbnail slider wasn't showing. So what I did is I clicked the arrow on the right of the toolbar, and there you can choose exactly what's going to be showing on the toolbar. If I needed to use my flagging features, I could include those. If I wanted to include my rating, my color labels, I would include those or not. And then from there, I could choose to see or not the thumbnail slider. So that's why I was futzing. But anyway, the reason I was futzing like that was so that I could make the thumbnails a bit bigger so you could see. And let's make it even bigger. Okay, so this thumbnail here, the metadata panel is telling me the exposure bias is 0.3 of an EV, which means I had opened up the exposure compensation by 0.3 of a f-stop. F-stop, no, 0.3 of an exposure value. Whether that is f-stop or shutter, Ron, doesn't that depend on what camera mode you're set to, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And then this next one, I had opened to 0.7 of an EV, so it's getting better in terms of color. It's not as blue as the one next to it, which was only 0.3. So there's 0.7, and this one here is 0.7. So, but that first one that I've been working on, which was here, did not have any adjustment for the problem that we're talking about. So anyway, let's take the one we were working on back into the Develop module by selecting it in the grid and pressing D on the keyboard. That switches me over to the Develop module. So I took care of, to some extent, the color problem. But now we have the other problem, which is it's too dark, because this is the one that I didn't do the exposure compensation on. And so all I'm going to do is come down into the basic panel, and I'm going to play with the sliders. Of course, the exposure slider first, and that's moving the mid-tone values, and that's affecting the overall brightness. Now, one thing I like to do, by the way, is I don't always just drag the slider, because it's hard to control it with the mouse. I'm going to double-click the slider head to put it back to 0. A lot of times I'll just click in the field to the right of a slider, and then I'll use the up arrow key on my keyboard. And with the exposure slider, notice that that's increasing it by a tenth of a value. I'm not very good at math.
I love your little tips. They're
Yeah,
just
that's a
little
great tip.
tiny things.
Isn't that cool?
I'm always sliding things too far.
So if I wanted to increase this by 1/3 of a stop, then I would just click my up arrow 3 times, and it says plus 0.3 in that box. That's 1/3 of a stop. If I keep going to 0.6, that's 2/3 of a stop. And if I go all the way up here, clicking the up arrow until I get to 1, that's the equivalent of a full stop on the camera. Nice?
Mm-hmm.
And from here, you can just play. You know, the other thing I might do is see what would happen if I open up the shadows, which should affect those 3/4 tone dark areas, you know, the shadow areas in the snow, and maybe bring down the highlights a bit to bring in some detail in the snow. And, of course, my friend, clarity. And if I don't want to have clarity all through the snow, what would you guys do if you just wanted clarity in the where this business is in the middle?
Use a brush.
Yeah, you could use a brush. You could try using the radial filter, which is always fun. I love that. I use it kind of like a way of dodging and burning, where I don't even have to paint. So let's say I come in here, and with the radial filter, what will happen if I increase the clarity a bit, and then draw a little radial filter here. Maybe I'll do it. I just might be able to see, see that a little more. Now, what is happening where everything is getting brighter except inside of my radial filter? It's because...
Okay, sorry.
Well, you know. Go ahead, Erika. What is
So
it?
I see that there's a little invert mask
Invert
thing at the
mask,
bottom.
yes.
So
Correct.
that's what I would suggest.
So this tool is set to be kind of a vignetting tool, but I think most people like to use it the opposite way to affect what's inside the circle rather than what's outside. So if I click the invert mask checkbox, now the changes that I made, I was kind of brightening up things up. It's affecting this area inside the circle. I'll do it a whole lot more. See that? And not the area outside the circle. And then if you get it where you like it, you can make a copy of that radial filter. Let's see if I remember this. I'm going to hold down the Option key and the Command key. That's the Alt key and the Control key on PC, and click right on that radial filter. and it just made a duplicate. And then I'll click and drag the duplicate away from there. So I've still got one radial filter here and a duplicate over here having the same effect on this other thorn. And again, I could Command plus Option and drag another one over here, and I've got 3 the same. Now this is, then I can futz with each one if it's too much. So those are some of the things that I might do to get from the original of this to the way better. Yay!
Yay! All right.
Hey, Jan, do you ever use the white balance color picker? Like, it seems like snow might be
That's
neutral.
a great question. Let's try it. You know why I don't like it so much? Because it's totally different depending on which pixel you click on.
Right.
And you get in control at the pixel level. So if I get that color balance picker thingy do, and I click here, everything gets really orange. But what if I try to click here? Well, in this case, it's not. It's just going to change so drastically as I just click, and you can't control it very well. So it's a kind of a you-know-what shoot.
Yeah. So do you know what I do with
So
that?
unless
I
you know
find
you have something that's really neutral.
Yeah. What I do, I find shade is naturally bluish anyway, so to pick something in the shade is not the best way to use the color picker tool. Especially snow, if you've got a blue sky and bright sun, that snow, the shade is going to be blue. It should be blue. That is the right color. Well, maybe not too blue, but there should be a bluish tint to your snow. Whereas if someone's wearing a gray coat and you're able to pick an area of a highlight off the coat, it would give you a more accurate reading.
I did pick up a really cool tip that I love. If you're doing portraits and you're really struggling with getting the white balance right, just zoom in a little closer on their face and do the white of their eye. And that seems to work really well. And so I'm always looking for that white of the eye to get me close, and then I can adjust from there.
Well, that's really a great tip. Thank you. And I guess that is a reason then to use a gray card, because then you would have a middle gray tone that you knew you could rely on, rather than just guessing at what perhaps is the most neutral thing in the image. Anyway, I did a little before and after split screen here by the 2 Y's at the bottom of my screen. And what a difference with very little work. And, this is one of the things I just love to emphasize. People say, should I use Lightroom or Photoshop? I'm like, this is so much easier for most normal human beings. A few clicks, as long as you know what to click, and you're ready to go. Whereas in Photoshop, can you imagine trying to, what would you do to reduce the blue color cast in Photoshop?
Well, Photoshop, what a lot of people don't realize is that Camera Raw has the same tools that Lightroom has in Photoshop, but it's laid out so differently. It's just really awkward compared to the flow of Lightroom. How to use the tools in Lightroom is laid out in a more intuitive way. But if I was out of Camera Raw, definitely this is a lot more challenging than a few clicks of a mouse.
But I am curious, do any of you have a method that you use in Photoshop for color casts in particular?
No, I do it in Lightroom, and then if I need to do some layer stuff, then I'll push it out to Photoshop.
Yeah.
Right. I'm saying once I'm in Photoshop, I'm supposed to know Photoshop, but even with that, I still have trouble with color cast more than anything, because there's no clear tool in Photoshop for dealing with it. You could try using color channels, like maybe go into the blue channel and pull it down toward gold. You could do the color balance adjustment layer and play with the individual color values.
That's what I do.
But there's no one thing. You just go, oh, okay. There is in levels there are the eyedroppers, and I believe if you use the middle gray eyedropper inside the levels dialog box, you can kind of use that like the eyedropper in Lightroom. But those things are all kind of obscure, and you have to know about them, right?
Yeah, I find that once you're in Photoshop and out of Camera Raw, tweaking that fine adjustment is more like trying to move an egg with a bulldozer. It's a little more complicated. And I found sometimes using camera filters, like the filter gallery, works really well because they're a lot more subtle, or creating your own gradient can work as well. But then it's getting a little more advanced.
Yeah, because you can use the color filter thing, which some people do, and then you lessen the opacity of it.
Yeah.
And that can, but it's not as easy or intuitive as Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom.
Well, let me show you one more thing before I go, since we have time tonight. I'm going to actually come out of this before and after view, if I can. Let's see. Oh, I'm not very good at that, am I? Let me see. What do we want to just go here? Okay, and I'm going to take it back to when it was all ugly and terrible, blue. And I wanted to show you something neat about the sliders in Lightroom 5.3. And 5.3 was an update, a free update for Creative Cloud people and anybody who owns Lightroom, actually, in any way. And it usually those dot updates just give more kind of camera and lens support and fix bugs. But they slipped a few little additional features in Lightroom 5.3. And you know, I never get around to using them. And then when I do, I always am happy that I took the time to learn them. Because the engineers are smart, and they're not just giving us things, you know, to keep themselves in business. They're giving us things in response to people saying, couldn't you make this easier? So let me show you what I found that you can do. And basically, it's that you can now use individual sliders like auto corrections. So before this, you know, if I put everything back the way it was by clicking tone here, that puts all the sliders back to their defaults of 0. So even before Lightroom 5.3, you could go to the tone section in the basic panel and click the auto button, and that would set all the sliders in that section of the basic panel to whatever Lightroom thought the correct value should be. It did an okay job here. It made it certainly not as blue and a lot brighter. And that was fine. But now, since 5.3, you can adjust these sliders independently of one another. So if I go back and set it to tone, for example, and then I just want to get auto exposure, not auto contrast, auto whites and blacks, just the auto exposure, I hold down the shift key and I double click on the slider head or on the name exposure. Either way.
Oh my goodness.
It's just totally, you can't do that.
You can't know that, right? I know. Only a weirdo like me knows. Let's do it. I'm going to double click. And did you see that this exposure slider went over to plus 85?
I love that.
Get out of here.
I love that.
That's like,
I'm supposed to know about this stuff.
yeah, like.
That's why I usually don't use auto, because it affects all of them so much.
Yeah, it just goes
That's
crazy.
great. I love that.
Yeah, that's why I get the big bucks.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why we tune into the show, is because every time I tune into the show, I learn something wonky like that. Just
Every single time.
Okay, now here's a question. Can you set that so it just affects that on a batch import as an import preset?
Oh, that's interesting. I assume that you could. Sure, I can't see why not. But here's the thing, though. I don't know if you can set it to auto.
Yeah,
that's.
I mean, you can
know.
set it to everything auto, but then it does it does all the sliders.
I haven't tried that. I will try that. But I do want to show you even something
it's
like
even more wonky.
Do you guys remember in Photoshop, before we had Lightroom, the first thing you'd always do is you get the levels dialog and you would set the white and black point by dragging the black and white input arrows. Remember that in levels in Photoshop? Mm-hmm. Well, this business of being able to adjust independent sliders in Lightroom lets you do almost the same thing here in Lightroom. So let's say I fix my exposure the way I did, and then I shift and double click on contrast. That increased the contrast a bit. Then I go down to set the white and black points. If I now shift double click on whites, it set the white point, took it way down. Usually it takes it the other way. And the same thing on blacks, took it way down. That is the same thing as how we used to have to do, where you would take the white slider and drag it to the point just before there was a spike or see like that. But this is doing it for you automatically.
So that takes it just to the edge of clipping?
Just to the edge of clipping. Thank you.
That's awesome.
The way to
So,
say
yeah,
it.
I've always used the J key to show the red and the blue
Right,
where it's
clipping,
clipping
yeah.
light and dark.
That's a
That's
good
awesome.
one. J key. That's the same, I guess, as going up to the histogram and clicking the
Yeah.
clipping indicator and then moving the slider. See those red points coming up? Now, there is something interesting about this, though, and I tested this, and it's true, that the way it sets the whites and blacks sliders in this manner depends on your other settings. So if I had a different, let me put whites and blacks back to 0 by double-clicking their labels. If I put exposure at something else, like that, now when I shift double-click the white slider, it goes to a different number than it did before.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So this it's no longer true if you use this feature that it doesn't matter which order you do the sliders in Lightroom, which is what we'd always been taught, right? Now the whites and the black auto adjustments seem to be depending on your other tonal adjustments first.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Does make sense. Do you know what I did notice about Lightroom? And this happens when I was trying to do demonstrations, is if you're pulling the exposure slider to the right, Lightroom doesn't just move the entire exposure. It does its best to compress the highlights if you're sliding to the right, to prevent it from peaking or from clipping the whites, like you say with the red mask showing. So as you slide over, it begins to bunch up all those highlights and does its best not to overexpose. And the same thing when you slide to the left. When you slide to the left, it'll do its best not to lose the shadows by bunching up the shadow area without it clipping over into that blue that we see when you have that little triangle checked.
Well, it's interesting. I see that it's actually not working on the shadow end. I think what you're talking about is true, but I think it's primarily for the highlight end.
More for highlights, yeah.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It rolls it off. So look, I'm pulling exposure all the way to the right, and we're not getting a spike.
It really tries to keep the white from blowing out. It's designed that way.
So it's not quite the same as changing exposure compensation on the camera.
Not at all, no, because it's compressing that dynamic range of the top of edge of the film, the highlight edge of the film, where the
now I can still get that spike though by taking the white slider and dragging it to the right. See the spike?
The white slider moves everything. That's like a real exposure slider.
Yes, and that's.
I use highlight alerts enabled on my camera at all times, so I have the little what I call blinkies showing.
Yeah,
so,
the blinkies.
Yeah, but I mean it's a JPEG, you know. They're using the highlights from the JPEG file, not preview file, not from the RAW.
Yeah.
But yet it gives me a pretty good estimation of where I'm at. And sometimes I allow some blinkies because I know I can pull it back in RAW if I know that it's not too severe. But it's interesting to see that we all use exposure compensation and how it does differ from this and what we use to compensate for that in camera to make sure we're not exposing too far in camera.
Yeah.
True, and you know it's really important that people understand that the point you made that what they're looking at on the back of their camera is a JPEG rendition of the photo, because a RAW file could not be, you couldn't see it. A RAW file is nothing visible. It's just ones and zeros. So the camera, the little computer inside the camera is doing all kinds of things to reveal to you or display that thing on the back of the camera. That's not really what you're shooting when you're shooting RAW. And that's hard. It's really, you got to do a thing in your mind. So that leads me to the last point I was going to make about the new features in Lightroom 5.3. Often we get that JPEG preview on the back of the camera looking the way we like, and then we shoot. And then we bring it into Lightroom, and we're like, that doesn't look like that, right? Does that happen to you ever, Erika? I'm sure underwater.
Well, I'm used to it, and so I just kind of go, and then I fully process my images when I'm home. But when I'm on a shoot, I just know what I'm kind of trying to get. It's just a rough estimation, so it doesn't bother me, but I'm used to it. So
that's great. So basically, I think what I would hope people are doing is if they are chimping or looking at the backs of their camera after they take a photo, they're looking at composition and placement of elements and point of view, not looking so much at color and tone, because that is not what you're going to get when you open your RAW file for the same photo in Lightroom, right?
It's adding saturation and sharpness as well on that.
Yeah.
Well,
I find that the more experience you get in shooting, the more you trust that you're getting what you need into your raw file, like you say, Erika, if you're not getting your blinkies. You get to know what the back of your camera is telling you, even though it's not a true representation. Yeah, I find after shooting years on similar Nikon equipment now, I can tell just by looking at it, even with or without the blinkies and a quick histogram, whether or not I have enough detail. And because I love to artistically alter my images anyway, I don't need that perfect exposure in camera. I just need the best one for the job.
So here's a question. Do any of you change the preset setting on the camera, like whether it's landscape, portrait, neutral,
I keep
depending
mine
on what you're shooting so that the JPEG will look different, or you just don't
I
bother
don't.
with it?
But the only times I've changed it, I think I changed it on one of my cameras when I was shooting events and I was just turning them into somebody. And so I was shooting JPEG because I need the quickest possible processing and out the door. And it has the sharpening done, it has the tonal corrections done. And so if I'm doing it for a slideshow for church and I know that's the final destination, I'll shoot small or medium JPEG, and that way my processing is sped up so much because I've got more, I've got more contrast in my images, I've got brighter color pop, and so that's the only time that I will adjust the back of my camera in my in-camera stuff, is if I know my output is something where I don't want to spend the time to process it.
And I'm so glad you asked that, Dave, because that's a perfect segue into the last new feature in Lightroom 5.3.
All right.
Trying to talk about it.
So, what Dave's talking about, you may not have ever looked so deeply into your digital camera menus, but you can change the way that those photos are processed inside your camera, and therefore the way the JPEG rendition appears on the back. Now, every camera manufacturer does that differently. So, like here, I have some photos taken with a Nikon. Ooh, that's interesting. So if I have that Nikon photo, and it looked a certain way on my camera back, and then I bring it into Lightroom, and it doesn't look that way. Like it probably didn't look this yellow or something on the back of my camera. Then what I can do in Lightroom is go into the Develop module, down to the very bottom, into the camera calibration panel there, and there's a profile menu. And this menu is specific to whatever brand of camera I'm using. So if I click here where it says Adobe Standard, what that means is that by default, Lightroom is using a formula that Adobe came up with that to render the pixels, or render the ones and zeros in the raw file into pixels so that we can see them here on our computers. And in the course of so doing, it's putting particular color values, particular tonal values, and this is what we see, this kind of dark yellowish image. But because the Nikon camera software offers different ways of doing that inside the camera to display in the back of the camera, here in Lightroom I can try to match that by choosing from this profile list a different Nikon specific profile. Like, let's see what camera neutral does to this photo. Not too much different. Let's see, camera vivid. There, do you see that difference? Very much more vivid. Yeah. It looks ridiculous, but as opposed to the Adobe Standard. Okay, so that's been there for a while. And if you don't like the way that the Adobe Standard is making your raw files show up, at first blush when you bring them into Lightroom, then you can always go to the camera calibration panel. You can choose one that works better for you. Like I know some landscape shooters like to choose with Nikons. They like to set this to camera landscape or camera vivid, I believe.
Yeah, I've done that sometimes myself as the first step before I changed anything else, because it kind of got it closer to what I originally saw on the back.
For you?
Hmm?
Does it change all of the sliders? So like if Jan
No, the sliders all stay neutral.
At zeros. Okay.
It just alters the interpretation of the raw file on all the images in if you have them all selected, all the images in the collection, or just one at a time.
Right. Okay, so that's all been there for a while, and you're saying it way better than I am, because this is a non-pre-prepared demo. Right? We're just talking.
We're Nikon guys, so that's why.
Here's the thing. Now, I stopped being a Nikon person because my D90 is the last Nikon I bought, basically because I can't afford good ones. I don't spend $50,000 on another camera. So what I did is I got an Olympus camera. And I love the thing because it's little, and I'm little, and I can take it anywhere, and it's got a great sensor and all the interchangeable lenses and the tilt screen and the viewfinder, and it's just a marvelous camera. And I use it more because it's not a to-do to take it with me. But I was like always looking in here for my Olympus, when I shot with Olympus, like these photos here. Let's get a more colorful one. Here we go. So if I shoot, something colorful with the Olympus camera, I was always bummed because I come over here to profile and there wouldn't be anything in this menu except for Adobe Standard. So now, finally, yay, in Lightroom 5.3, they put in the profiles that Olympus makes that these are the same ones I can choose inside my camera when I'm shooting, to change the way the colors look on the back of the camera. These are different than the Nikon ones. So here we don't have landscape or whatever you guys have for Nikon, just camera muted, which is, I guess, a little more subtle, camera natural, camera portrait, and then a vivid one. And these are specific to Olympus. So I'm very happy to find these in here because now I can finally play this game too.
Now, I just want to say, Jen, a very practical use for that, because a lot of people say, well, what's the practical use? I can just set that in my camera. Like Erika, you shoot, like I do, events often at church, and I shoot JPEG, and I hand them over. So I make sure in my camera I have it set on camera standard or camera big, whatever suits the purpose. This feature allows you to shoot in RAW and import to Lightroom and then make your decision about which one looks best. For example, Scott Jarvie, a fairly, most of us know, a very popular wedding photographer and G+ guy, would shoot an entire wedding, import it, and then put a camera setting like Camera Vivid on as a starting point on the entire strip. So that puts it onto the RAW rather than shooting the JPEG. So he gets to shoot the RAW, import, and then apply it to the whole film strip.
You said it very well. This is exactly what it does. It allows you to, as a starting point for adjusting your RAWs, having them look as close as possible to the way the JPEG looked on the back of your camera. Even if you didn't shoot JPEGs for the church, even if all you were doing is shooting RAW, you still would want this probably to look like it looked to you on the back of the camera, and that's a JPEG. So, and then Erika asked if this affected the sliders, and the answer is no. So if you look at the, sorry, I already looked on this. This should not be like this, but you know, if I put this back to 0, it shouldn't change. Now maybe I'll eat my words, but I think let's try a different one. Let's change this to camera muted, and then go back to the basic sliders, and no, it does not affect them. They remain at their defaults to start with, and then this is just your starting place. So now I would certainly increase the clarity and maybe add some vibrance and open up the shadows and so forth to process the photo just like any other. But you know, one thing I see beginners doing a lot is they'll get their RAW files and they'll look at them and they all look kind of dull and icky because they're being rendered with that you know, generic Adobe standard profile. And they go, oh, I thought that I shot such great photos and these look gross. And I'm like, no, do not throw these away. You're just starting. You know?
People say, oh boy, my iPhone takes a lot better pictures than that. You know, just because you know, it's already adding so much sharpness and saturation.
You don't have, my sister-in-law posts these beautiful pictures of her snowboarding, and there's no adjustments done to them.
Yeah.
Like, I gotta say, the iPhone's got some.
It's pretty awesome the way it automatically do apply those. But yeah, when we're shooting RAW, we have to make all those decisions.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. All right.
Most of the time, it's just because it makes me feel superior, like a professional.
Yes. What is that? I have a science degree, or what do they say?
Yeah.
I
have a science degree. I can't work Google.
Did you? Oh, you unscreen shared. I was going to ask you while you were down by the camera calibration, and I think your point there was that Adobe keeps adding more and more as new cameras come out. Do any of you use the lens correction feature in Lightroom that adjusts for?
Yeah.
Oh yes, a lot. Actually, Erika, you can speak on this because you really use it a lot now that you discovered it.
I mean, the ones with the built-in database of lenses.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Every lens I have is profiled there. So, but what I end up doing is I use it, but I go back and I add things back in. So, like, I'll hit it and click it and like, well, you know, I actually like the vignette that lens does. And so I'll put the natural vignette back, but I always click it at first because I want to get rid of some of the chromatic aberrations that it does naturally. And it fits them exactly right. It knows where in the image to look for them, I believe. So I always click it as a starting point, and then I go back and say, but that lens has some character to it, and I want that character. And so then I bring that character back.
Well, two things about that. The other very fun things for Olympus users is, you know, if you go in, I think we talked about this before, you can't find a profile for the Olympus cameras. Like, it doesn't find that profile automatically, and I went searching online and I could not find one to download, which would mean, oh my God, I would have to make my own. And the way for making lens correction profiles, these are not the ones you're talking about, but the ones used in the lens correction panel, if you're to fix perspective or barrel distortion and so forth. You would have to make your own, and it's a nightmare because you have to shoot a pattern and then scan the pattern into your computer and go through this whole mishigas. But here's what I found out. The Micro Four Thirds cameras actually have the lens correction built into the camera. So that by the time you get the raw file, that's why there are none to be had.
Because they're already corrected, pre-corrected. See, one more reason to get one of those small cameras.
It is. And I think it's in the lenses, actually. I may have misspoke. Maybe someone out there knows better than I if the correction is in the Micro Four Thirds lenses or cameras. Probably the lenses.
Yeah, somebody will know, somebody who likes to study that stuff. I always say I'm not a gearhead, and then I start talking to people about gear, and it's surprising how much I actually am. It's scary.
I think you need to be. I think we're being naive when we say, oh, those people who talk about gear, because I find that the more I know about how my camera works, the more freedom I have to be artistic, because if you don't know what you're doing, you're just dialing things and hoping for the best. It's a crapshoot, right? If you know what you're doing, you know how your camera works, like you do, Ron. Look at the
I was going to say, Robin Cohn has a question. She says when she goes to the profile area in her drop-down, it has nothing except the word embed. Do you know what that's about?
Oh, she must be working with a JPEG.
Yeah, Robin, perhaps you're working with JPEG files? That's the consensus. Do you know what? I do want to point out one thing that I observed about applying lens profile corrections and the spot healing brush. Now, we've had a little bit of conversation about this in the Photoshop and Lightroom users community, is that some people with slower systems have noticed that if they apply lens corrections before doing their spot healing with the little spot healing tool, that if they apply the correction first, it really slows down that process. And so my advice to you is if you have found that when you're spot healing, things begin to slow down and slow down and slow down, just check to make sure you haven't applied your lens profile corrections first. And generally that only applies on a system that's slower, but I've heard it affect faster systems as well.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Just in case you wanted to know.
That's a great tip. Thank you, Ron, because that sort of thing is so frustrating. People can never find the answers, so it's good to know.
Yeah.
Did you have something, Dave? Sorry.
No, I'm good. I just said interesting.
Dave wouldn't know about that because he has a system faster than NASA. So.
Well, you know, I had a system faster than NASA, and when I upgraded to Adobe CC or something happened, I had my scratch disk set to my C drive, which had everything on it, and I had only given it a little bit of access to some memory. So I was really bogged down and slowed down. I didn't know what was wrong, and I kept looking. I kept running virus scans on my computer, and I had realized I had set all my settings wrong in Photoshop. And I don't know how in the process that got set wrong or slowed down, and I'm good now. So even if you have a super fast system, you sometimes
double check the performance settings after an update. That very same thing happened to me last week.
Okay,
It's
so I'm not alone.
to see. Yeah, and it's small. And I switched it, and immediately it ran fine again.
Yeah, yep, and that's exactly what happened to me. My performance settings were set just so improperly that I was feeling like I was working on a computer slower than my laptop.
Yeah. Now, do you know what? I would love to switch gears for the last few minutes of the show because, Jan, you're involved in something really exciting. And as you know, I'm involved in mentorship. And I thought we might be able to talk a little bit about those two things. First of all, with the Arcanum, pretty strange name, but it's the brainchild of Trey Ratcliffe, and it's a way for people to, I'm pretty sure it's by a subscription basis, but it seems to be that it's going to be fairly affordable to get yourself a mentor and begin to train and level up. Is that right?
That's exactly right. You know, if you guys want to see more about what's going on with this, go to the Arcanum or the Arcanum.com. So it's TheArcanum. And here I have that. Oh, I forgot I'm not screen sharing anymore, so you can't see it. Let me screen share again. So you can just see this real quick. And here. Is that showing now, the Arcanum website?
Yes.
Okay. So here, when you go to the Arcanum.com, at the very top there's a giant video and it fills the whole screen. And you're welcome to listen to that, and it's Trey talking about his vision for what the Arcanum is. And it basically is the master-apprentice system, the way by which so many professions were taught in the past, or not taught in the past, but acquired in the past. You know, by not by somebody standing up at the front of the room and lecturing to you, but working with you on a personal basis. And because Trey is Trey, he has access to so many amazing photographers, you know, people who have been helping other people in Google Plus and other places online for so long, and really have a feel for how to do that. And he has enlisted them as masters. And oh my God, I am so amazingly honored that they asked me to be a master. I just, you know, I'm like, why me? I don't know, right place, right time, whatever it is.
Why not you? You are a master.
That's
Oh
right.
You
God.
demonstrate it every time we're on this show.
That's right.
Well, thank you. But you know, there are people. A lot of the people doing this are more on the shooting side. I think they're going to be emphasizing different photography disciplines. And so, if you're interested in participating, go to thearcanum.com, read through how it works, and then apply. And I believe that probably, you know, if you apply, that doesn't mean right away you get to participate, because there are so many people who are interested and not so many masters, but eventually, you know, maybe that will work for you. So I'm excited about it. We're just getting started with it. Now, I know also that you, Ron, have been doing mentorships where you've been working with individuals for a long time now, and I want to know more about that. I signed up for your mentorship newsletter just the other day so I could find out more about what you're doing.
Oh, great. Yeah, I love to talk about the mentorship program, and I can't talk about the mentorship program without first thanking Randy J. Braun for starting it, the Google Plus mentorship program for photographers. And that is where more advanced photographers, and you don't have to be an ultra master, more advanced photographers share skills that they have that others don't in a free community environment. And we initially created courses or little groups that we would run. And then I think several of the people in our chat have participated in that, and they could all say, and I doubt there would be some person that said they haven't been affected by that program. What that led to was I was getting really busy with them and found that I wanted to offer a more robust program, and so I created Mentorship Plus, and I'll do a screen share of that in a second, where you can join in a small group mentorship that works with all the latest tools that we have. We deal with a private blog, private communities, on-air hangouts, one-on-ones, and assignments in a way that methodically helps you grow. One of the things that I realized about the internet, and especially with Google Plus, is the access to immense amounts of information all at once. And that cuts like a two-edged sword. It gets really confusing really fast. And I thought, with all of this information, why aren't people learning faster? And I think the reason is because there's no structure. We get a little bit here, we get a little bit there. We start reading. 4 hours later, we're so fascinated by what we're reading, we learned about a whole bunch of stuff but remember nothing. And so the point of the mentorship is to grow in a community environment in a structured way that helps people learn in steps that build one on another. I'm just going to do a screen share if you want to know more about them. If you don't, that's fine, but I can't mention that. So
how does it work while you're doing that? Do you have hangouts with the group as a whole that you're mentoring, or do you do individual hangouts where you look at work? What do you do exactly?
Yes, I do both. This will take a second to pop up, I think. Hopefully.
It's really hard to talk while that's happening, I have to tell you.
I think I shared the wrong screen. Am I sharing the right screen now?
I see a bride.
Okay, so this is ronclifford.com, and if you just go down here, right in the middle, it says Mentorships and Workshops, and I'm just going to walk you through that. And that'll drop you onto the kind of blog page. And just this week, I shared about Success in Photography Mentorship, and I just want to share this because I'm so proud of what Marjorie is doing. She's very talented. She is one of my previous students, and this shares with you kind of some of the work that she's been doing recently. Now, I can't take credit for the work. She's talented, and she's taken some of what I offered her and obviously what others have offered her and begun to produce just some stellar work. And I just wanted to share that, and I did that in a blog post that you can read about. And it's about the mentorships. And then if you're on that site, you can go to mentorships and coaching and just look. There's 3 that I offer, and they're at a fee. But for example, I offer a very straightforward one. This one's more on editing. It's called Layers, Masks, and Modes, Oh My. And it's just on the fundamentals of Photoshop. It's not fancy, but it really covers those 3 things in a very concise way. It's not complicated, and it's in a group. So we work live one-on-one with the same files. And I find that's how people can learn.
And what are the others are more about shooting, is that right?
Yeah, and my most popular one, and actually there's only 2 spaces left in this one, I'm starting next week, is called Enhancing Creativity. And what this one is, there's more information about it than there is images. This one here is for people that find themselves stuck. They want to grow in photography, but they're not quite sure what the next step is. They are often frustrated. They know they've got more within them, but they need someone to help them bring it out. And that's my gift. That's what I specialize in. And so that's my primary mentorship is this one right here, Enhancing Creativity. And Dave, I believe you've been through both of them, right? This one and
I went through this one a year and a half ago. Yeah.
This one, yeah.
Yes.
So yeah.
Definitely opens your eyes to see things differently, and
yeah,
and something that everyone should do mentorships over and over. I think. I mean, you learn from different people, different things. I think it's great.
So do you learn from others in the class as much as from Ron? How does that work?
I think that's for you, Dave. Yeah.
Well, I think Ron may be doing more group hangouts than we did back then. So at that point, I think I learned more from the assignments and interaction with Ron. But I did enjoy and learn a lot from seeing what others were doing as well. Different interpretations. It's kind of like giving an assignment to different people and seeing how they interpret it differently, I think opens your eyes to a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, I think the magic of the mentorship program happens in a community. Google Plus is all about relationships, finding interesting people, and building a community. And I think the mentorship programs, not just mine, but all the other mentors, and Robin Griggs-Wood, heavens knows I owe her a debt of gratitude for helping me get started in the program as well. She's just so generous and so talented. Really focused on the fact that we're all in it together. And where one person maybe has a weakness, another person has a strength. So it's not just me, saying, oh, I'm so great, I'm going to teach you all something. It's about a community learning together. And it really has a lot of power.
How much time, Ron, should someone expect to put in for the course?
Well, Dave can answer that better. I guess it depends on how, you get out of it what you put into it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say. You will get out much more if you really put some time into it.
Yeah.
And take it seriously.
There is a once-a-week assignment, and that assignment can take an hour, or it could take you, shooting 5 days a week.
Yeah, I'd always have at least several hundred frames for a particular assignment. Just trying all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
And then what? Then it's also incumbent on you to narrow them down. That's hard, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. And then I have a submission time, so 5 to 8 images get submitted for each assignment, and then I comment and in a very encouraging way critique what they've submitted and move forward from there.
So that's a skill, isn't it, Ron? Being able to, the word critique implies critical, right?
Okay, let me unscreen share for a second there.
So talk about that. I'm interested.
I don't want to go on too much of a bent. The word critique, unfortunately, is based in what we think is the word critical. And I really believe that in order to help somebody grow, you need to encourage. I believe there's a time for critical judgment or a critical eye, but never a negative eye. That doesn't help anybody. And so I would rather catch somebody doing something right and encourage it. And after all, most people are pretty intelligent. They know what they're doing wrong inside. They don't have to be, exposed for it. They need to be encouraged. And that's my premise in mentorship. There's a time for a critique where you put your pictures on the wall and a professor will come and rip you apart. But that's not what I do.
You can get that on the grid.
Yeah, you can go to the grid for that.
Yeah, Kelby likes doing that to me. Well, so, being in class in grad school and the guys were crying during the critique, and that
yes,
isn't helping anybody. That's
it's not helping anybody. Some people feel that really does help you grow, but it's my experience. I've seen extremely rapid growth with a very different approach.
I'm sure you're great at it because you're such a...
So the last thing I wanted to say, and you do help outs as well, is I offer some help outs, and I have what I'm doing is I have a free help out, and you can come in and just conference with me for a half an hour. If you're feeling stuck creatively, you're not sure you want to jump in a mentorship, or you want to talk about something photographically, I'm available on Google Helpouts for that, and I'm making myself available over the next few days to just jump in with me in a hangout, a one-on-one, and just talk it over and see if maybe the mentorship's a fit, or if it's not, or anything else that might be a fit. And so I'll just share that link, and I'll just show the web page. I'll share that link in the chat. I get so confused. Screen sharing should be much faster than this.
But that would be a great way if someone isn't sure, they want to just talk with you a little bit, be a way they could do that before signing up for a mentorship.
Yes.
So it isn't that expensive. I was amazed. Your prices are so reasonable given the amount of time and effort you put in.
Hold on, I got to get to that page. I'm going to give you that funny thing. There we are. So this here is the help out. It's called Help. My photography is stuck and it can't get up, and it's free, and there's availabilities on Wednesday and Thursday if you just want to pop into that. And just search Ron Clifford on Helpouts and you'll get that.
Is that your photo you've got there?
Yeah, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite. That building, I was just there recently, and that building is pretty much to the ground now. But I've been following its life from when it was much taller to now when it's completely down.
We're looking at Erika, at something else. I don't know if you want to share everything on your screen.
No, I'm done screen sharing, so I'm just going to put that link in the chat when we're done and there. So yeah, that's kind of my deal on mentorship. I'm really big on it. First of all, the free mentorships, the Google Plus, G Plus mentorship program for photographers. Get on the page and like the page if you want to see upcoming mentorships, and that just depends on people's availabilities. Some people do it on landscape, on creative expression, on camera basics, there's just different ones from people with different skills. And I encourage that. And if you want something more robust and more personal and one-on-one, then I'd be happy to have you on one of my mentorships.
Wow, it sounds great. And you're so lucky to have done it, Dave. I wish I had time. I would definitely do it with you. Maybe in the fall, if you're still doing it.
Yeah. Well, I'll be running them pretty regularly, like I have been. It's a passion, and I love it.
Cool. Well, even though we didn't have a guest, we certainly did not want for things to talk about, did we?
No, we thought we might have a half hour. We've made it into an hour.
It's always great to talk to you guys. My Google Plus friends.
Yeah, it's such a good family.
It is. So what are we doing next, Ron? We've got a neat guest next week. We're not even going to wait 2 weeks, right?
That's right. We're going to go right away next week. And we have Carrie Ann Leckie Hepburn, but she says just call her Carrie Ann. She's amazing. She is a deep space astrophotographer who not only shoots incredible nebulas and deep space images, she's been featured on NASA and in different places. She's a meteorologist. She is a veritable expert on dark sky photography, and she's going to come and share with us how we can use 35mm equipment, or our equipment with telephoto lenses, to do some really great things, as well as show us a little bit about what she does with her equipment plus a telescope and plus some special equipment. And I can't wait, because I've seen her demonstrate live, and I got to tell you, she's enthusiastic and she really knows her stuff.
Excellent. Oh, I can't wait.
That'll be exciting.
So that is next Tuesday, the 28th, correct?
Yes, 28th of February, January. I'm getting ahead of myself. 28th of January. Carrie Ann, and she's going to talk to us about dark sky photography and the special way you need to process in Photoshop to make these things really come alive.
8:30?
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock Eastern.
We will, David Biedny sends his apologies. He's stuck in a snowstorm, and I hope he's safe. But he does, he was all prepared with some great stuff, so he will be here as soon as we can reschedule.
Okay. Well, thanks, everyone. Thank you. You were such an engaging group tonight. This was a great night. I'm not happy that David couldn't be here, but I'm happy that it turned out so well.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So we'll see you next week, and good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.